Well, it's something that's happened far too frequently around Kansas City in recent years, and that is the loss of an officer in the line of duty. And over the weekend, we found out that Wyandotte County Sheriff's Deputy Elijah Ming died at the age of 34 years old on, there's no such thing as a routine call, but it's certainly a call that's those men and women in law enforcement have dealt with many times before. In this case, Elijah Ming was responding to a call for help from a female who was moving out of a residence on Saturday afternoon. And that is when he shows up along with a KCK police officer, and 38-year-old Sean Harris opens fire on law enforcement. We now are happy to welcome on, despite the news, and say good morning to Daniel Soptic. He is the Wyandotte County Sheriff joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. Sheriff, good morning. What have these last 48 hours or so been like for you and your department?
Thanks for having me, Pete. It's been just a whirlwind of things happening and emotions and information and condolences. My phone hasn't stopped ringing.
What about this story do you want to make sure the public knows when it comes to what happened on Saturday at this residence? I know, we've seen a lot of the reporting on local television news, but take us through your perspective on what unfolded on Saturday and what led to the death of Officer Ming.
So, as you said, and it was information that I released during our press conference, our deputy, along with KCKPD, responded on, really one of the more simpler calls that our folks could go on. And we talk about routine calls not being routine, but this truly is something that my folks do every single day. And they were going to help somebody that needed to move out of the residence, and so she needed what we called a civil standby. We just go to keep the peace, and that they got there, and we see what unfolded and what happened, and so I think what I would like everybody to get out of it is this is stuff that people do, officers do every single day in every community in this country. And they deserve to be able to go home at night. And it's sickening that just really unprovoked as it appears that something like this can happen.
Now, do we know the woman who made the call to law enforcement? And of course, that's where Officer Ming responded. Was this woman living with Sean Harris, and was she looking for help in moving out of this residence because of issues with Sean Harris?
So some of that I have, some of that isn't currently available, and I think that probably the particulars of her situation or their situations probably best left until the investigation's completely concluded and the KBI is able to release their findings.
Okay. Now, what about Sean Harris does have a long criminal history. This is somebody who had issues on both sides of the state line. He had just been released from prison back in December, and he was sentenced to more than 11 and a half years in prison. A Kansas judge allowed the Missouri sentence to run concurrently to his sentence in Kansas. I understand if you may not want to go down this road, but just out of curiosity, how common is it when it comes to judges from one side of the state line allowing charges and convictions from the other side of the state line to run concurrently? And is that problematic as you see it? Because had they not been allowed to run concurrently, I guess there's a chance that this individual could still be behind bars.
Yeah, I don't know that I could speak intelligently to how often that happens, but I think it can be problematic. Doesn't mean it always is. I think it's a case-by-case basis. But in instances where we have, somebody that may have a violent history, and I'm kind of learning as we go, as the public is, what his history is. But I think it absolutely has, it has that opportunity to turn out this way. I've said many times that I think when the right people are put in jail and prison, we see crime rates reduce. And if that's where they need to stay, then great. If not, then we can go on with the system as it is. But yeah, sometimes people just need to stay in custody, unfortunately.
We are talking with Wyandotte County Sheriff Daniel Soptic on KCMO after the death of Deputy Elijah Ming over the weekend in Wyandotte County. So what can you tell us, and what do you want to make sure Kansas City knows about Officer Ming and his career and his personal life, of course, after 9 years with your department?
Yeah, when I was notified, obviously the information came out kind of spotty at first because it was unfolding, and you wonder who it is, and when you finally hear that name, your heart just sinks, and in this situation, it couldn't have sunk anymore. Elijah Ming was just one of those guys, and I know anybody that's watched the news or social media has probably heard this, but it is true. His smile was infectious, and it would light up a room. And I remember oftentimes walking down the hall, coming in the morning, he'd be walking out for shift. He'd smile down the hallway, and it was like the hallway just lit up. And I think what's special about that is that was him, and what you saw is what you got, whether he was at work or at home. The stories continue to come out about how he carried himself when he wasn't wearing this uniform, and I think that's important. That's what we expect from our law enforcement, and that's what the community expects and deserves. And he was the poster child for that.
What can you tell us about his family and who he leaves behind?
His family's amazing. I've had obviously many opportunities to talk and sit with them over the last couple of days. And they're just the most amazing group of people I've ever met. You never know how, you're going to react in a situation like this. And obviously I think they're going through all those different emotions right now. But the support system that was in place and is in place, it's just phenomenal. And so I know they're dealing with something that, unfortunately, a lot of other people have had to deal with in this country, and particularly this community. And I can't say enough about them and what they're currently going through.
What would you say, Sheriff, to regular Kansas Citians who, listen, get pulled over, get a call, whatever it might be, have an interaction with law enforcement? And you're right, and you referenced it earlier, that these calls are very routine, but you just don't know when these things will turn violent or turn deadly, and it happens in an instant. How do you remind everyday citizens around Kansas City that what the men and women do for your department and the departments around Kansas City obviously can't be viewed as routine, because if you let your guard down, not that it leads to tragedy, but it can in some cases lead to tragedy. So what would you like to remind the general public of here in the wake of what happened on Saturday, and how things should be perceived on this front going forward?
That's a great point. I think that a lot of times the issue of maybe an officer that has done something wrong, and the issue of how we approach situations are sometimes intermingled, and people forget. Our officers, our deputies, they do things a certain way, and it's very intentional the way they approach situations. And a lot of times the public can see that in a different light, and they don't understand why they do it. We hear that all the time. Why does that deputy do it that way? Why does he say it that way? And sometimes it's off-putting, even though it's not meant to be. But this is why, because they approach every single one of these quote unquote routine calls as not routine, but it is something that, particularly at the sheriff's office, civil standbys happen every single day, many times, multiple times a day. And so I just would ask the public to keep that in mind. I'm not excusing across the country any behaviors or acts from law enforcement that have been in the wrong, and in fact, I would condemn every single one of them. But in instances where that's not the case, it's just them trying to look out for themselves and their fellow deputies and the public. I would just ask that the public keep that in mind and give them the benefit of the doubt on that.
Well, Sheriff, we appreciate you joining us on KCMO. We will definitely keep in touch, and we'll be praying for you, for your department, as you guys work through the death of Officer Ming. Thank you so much for being here on KCMO.
Thank you for having me.
Daniel Soptic, the Wyandotte County Sheriff, on 95.7 FM after a tragic weekend for that department.